granniopteryx, granniopteryx. She knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Hello. Well, you know that time when somebody you think you know says just one thing that gives you a window into their mind that isn't very nice. You're seeing something there that puts you right off them or just makes you a little wary of them thereafter because it reveals something unpleasant about them, something a bit creepy perhaps. Anyway, it's not that I would call Wes Streeting a friend, but we have to listen to what he says in the same way and analyse what he says as a clue to what sort of a politician he is, because he is, after all, going for the top job. Not too sure he'll get it, but anyway, we can, if he does, we should be prepared. So I'm going to play something here and then I'll read you what he said. I don't have that, but I'll read you what else he said in his speech and then we'll think about what he's saying.
Unless we change course, we risk handing the keys of number 10 to reform. And I do not want that on our consciences. And Reform UK represent a threat to the values and ideals that have made this country great.
OK, now, first of all, I want you to pay attention to the consciences word. It's become, in his eyes, some sort of a religious mission that they have here to beat reform. He also says that reform stand for values, directly opposing values that made this country great. Which is simply a cut and paste statement which you will find on the left all the time, but it never specifies exactly. No, as a matter of fact, colonialism was what made this country great. By the way, I'm not criticising Britain for that. They were no worse than most other colonial powers at a time when colonialism was the thing to be, and they were definitely a lot better. India has a lot to thank Britain for. There were mistakes, there were missteps, but there were also the railways, a civil service, a government bureaucracy that brought all the states together, and, for instance, things like the banning of sati, which was the burning of widows. All right, so yeah, I'm not going to start talking about how terrible Britain was because Britain wasn't. But they won't admit that because that's what made Britain great and they don't like to talk about colonialism. However, I don't have him saying this, but this is how it's reported in the Telegraph. He told MPs, "I left the government because we're in the fight of our lives against nationalism, and it's a fight we're currently losing. Unless we change course, we risk handing the keys of number 10 to reform, and I do not want that on our consciences." So they've telescoped his speech there. So this religious mission he has is to do with nationalism. So I thought, I'll look up what nationalism means. And I got the Cambridge Dictionary to assist me in that investigation. And here it is. Nationalism, a nation's wish and attempt to be politically independent. That's what nationalism is. And why should fighting this, be a matter of a religious mission, a conscience? And certainly by that definition, there isn't anything particularly awful about nationalism now, is there? But it's become, as far as Mr. Streeting's concerned, it's not only the Labour Party's duty to fight nationalism tooth and nail, because apparently it's a great evil, it has absolutely to be overcome because that's a matter of conscience. Conscience is a religious aspect, is a religious concept. Now, To my mind, there are only two ways we can interpret his stand against nationalism. The first interpretation would be that what Streeting said about fighting nationalism was a confession that he thinks that pride in our country and its political independence must be battled at all costs. And a wish for political independence and pride in place is such a hideous evil that allowing it to triumph would actually weigh heavily on the conscience of any right-thinking person for all time. Right, that's the first possibility of interpretation. The second is we can interpret what he's saying as a misunderstanding of what the word nationalism actually means. I'm sorry to say that's the more likely interpretation to my mind. I think that it's entirely possible that for someone who's spent all his political life associating with the Fabian Society and being indoctrinated by Fabian principles since he was a mere stripling, I don't know whether you know, but Streeting was a young Fabian and took some leadership roles. I'm assuming by young Fabian he was a teenager at the time, but he would have certainly been in his very early 20s. Given that background, it's quite possible that Streeting has the idea that nationalism just means something pretty close to fascism. I'm just guessing, but I do have the feeling that nationalist and fascist must be pretty much interchangeable in the sort of circles I'm talking about. And it looks like he's just absorbed it and hasn't really thought any further than that. Well, thinking is so damn difficult, isn't it? So, let's recap. Which do you think it is? Does this aspiring Prime Minister mean he hates nationalism and therefore hates closed borders and the concept of Britishness? Or does it mean that he doesn't actually know what nationalism is, but he's been told to be against it by his Fabian mentors? For those of you who are not really clear about what the Fabian Society is, I can explain to you quickly that it's the sort of Muslim brotherhood of British socialism. That is, it's a semi-secret society dedicated to the overthrow of the present system, not by violent revolution, but by infiltration and entryism. I think that just about covers it. Although I'd add that as ludicrous as it sounds, the Fabians have been quite successful in warping the language we use as well, to the extent that, for instance, sympathy for capitalism has become a double plus bad thought crime. But back to Wes Streeting's complete misunderstanding of the word nationalism. That is, I'm assuming it's his misunderstanding. And that leads us to think, what else doesn't Streeting know about the English language? I'm not saying that just because I was an English teacher, by the way. I'm saying that because it's dangerous when people don't know the meanings of words. If we have a Prime Minister whose brain has been so mangled by dogma and by politically warped language that he could start a war just by taking or using a word wrongly. It means that when he has meetings with other prime ministers in other countries and he hears that one of them is a nationalist, he'll immediately be less forthcoming or less accommodating to that person because he's been indoctrinated to feel that whenever the description nationalist turns up, it means, well, the borders of Poland are under threat. So, I'm very worried about that. If he thinks nationalism is a matter of conscience, that's a window into a mind that's really rather dangerous. After all, in the name of conscience, you can do all sorts of dreadful and repressive things to save the country from itself, can't you? Anyway, one thing though, if Streeting does make it to number 10, I'm sure he'll decorate it in the best possible taste. Till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. and by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.